Hello and welcome to this standard 10, and it's all about safeguarding adults. So we are going to do safeguarding adults and children, but the children's book isn't there yet. So we're going to tie the two together because fundamentally a lot of the principles remain the same. There are definitely changes around legislation, but the types of abuse, etc., do remain the same. Okay, so let's start off with the Care Act 2014 defines an adult safeguarding as protecting an adult to live life in safe, free from abuse and neglect. So the principles are very, very straightforward. We just want people to live normal lives without worry or concern. Safeguarding is about organisations working together to promote people's health and well-being, to ensure that they're free from risk of abuse or from neglect. Safeguarding balances the rights of individuals to make an informed choice, so they are aware about people making unwise choices, whilst at the same time we need to promote the well-being, because the moment we start taking away people's rights and choices, we start to impede on well-being. We need to ensure that we take into account people's views and we're looking towards their feelings and their beliefs, and we take any actions to promote this. Health and social organisations have a responsibility and we all have a part to play. So it's important you understand your service's safeguarding policies and principles, and you know where to find those on your company's website. We know from previous training under the mental health and the other ones that well-being plays an important part in our mental health. Well-being includes the fact that we're being provided personal care. This includes treating people with respect. We know that care shouldn't be given in a way that makes us feel degraded or demoralised, or takes away some of our own values and beliefs. We know that our physical and mental health well-being need to be cared for. We need to be ensured that we're free from abuse and neglect. We need to have control over our day-to-day lives because the Human Rights Act says so as well. We need to participate in education, work, training and recreation. It's important we all have social and economical well-being. It's important that we have access to our family and personal well-being, and we're supported in our accommodation where we live, and we can make sensible contributions to society, so that's well-being. All of these aspects of well-being are relevant to people in care, and we need to support them to have the needs met. There's no hierarchy in this, they're all as important as each other. Well-being has equal importance to the person's well-being, and each of these need to be seen. We've already talked about informed choice. It's about providing information for people to understand. And again here, around the hierarchy of things, it's important we arrange and put things in order, which may be more important than one or another. So what's your responsibilities? So let's remember our first unit, which was all about understanding your organisation. Let's look at the second unit, which was about your personal development. The third unit, about duty of care. Well, all of that comes into play here because it's all about us taking responsibility to protect people from abuse and neglect, which may cause harm. We need to prevent harm as much as we can. And we know in our codes of practice, because you will have already read these, about what our codes of practice state. Harm includes ill treatment, including sexual abuse, exploitation or ill treatment, which is not just physical but mental as well. It can have intellectual, emotional, social behaviour, self-harm, neglect or unlawful contact with person's property, rights or interests in, such as financial abuse. So we're aware that there's actually a large array here of things that we're trying to avoid when we talk about harm. So, in this section, we're going to go through some signs and symptoms of abuse, and there's 10 in here that we're going to look at. And again, we'll try and talk these through so we've got a better understanding around what they are. So, physical abuse is seen by signs and symptoms. So this is things that we can see and things that people may tell us. So physical abuse may be me punching you and hurting you deliberately. Alternatively, it can be so it could be me using restrictive practices to stop you from moving. So for example, in care homes, I've seen all too many times tables being put up against chairs so people can't get up. It may be that in beds we're putting cot sides up or bed rails, unnecessarily restricting free movement. So examples of physical abuse may be bruising, clusters, marks, symptoms that can't be explained. Maybe they're changing their behaviour and wearing baggier clothes. You may see bites or scald marks. So physical abuse can be direct contact or indirect contact. Domestic violence is indicated through threatening behaviour. Again, it may be through emotional warfare, so I could be swearing at you, degrading you, and making you feel less valued as a person. I could be doing that by restricting your movement, by taking away your finances, and by making you dependent upon me. Other areas around that might be looking at practices such as grooming, where I lure you in to make you feel safe and then I take away everything around you. Signs of domestic abuse of any of those relating to the different types of abuse or neglect can occur in any of those incidences. So the problem with domestic violence is you may not see it, but you'll see the aftermath. So maybe you'll see such signs as physical, for bruising if they've been hit, or maybe emotional, and you see that people are starting to withdraw and they're coming away. Modern slavery looks at human trafficking, forced labour, and again, in our society, we have modern slavery. If you think about car washing services, where there's lots of people washing cars for £5, they're obviously not being paid the minimum wage because that's a lot of labour for very little work. Maybe nail bars are seen to be areas of cheap labour. Or alternatively, people being human trafficked into the country for the sex trade. So modern slavery, lots of issues there. Again, signs that we may see, we may be looking at people being malnutrition, so they're looking dishevelled, they're not looking well and healthy. They may have an inability to pay for things, so they may be doing risky behaviour things, they may be stealing and other things like that. They may have few documents. People that come in through modern trafficking will have their passports held and they're threatened, so they feel frightened. Again, they may find it difficult to give eye contact because they're trying to look away because they don't want to be seen. So that's modern slavery. Looking at financial or material abuse is when we take away the ability to pay for something, or we take something of value away from somebody and leaves them in a vulnerable situation where they have an inability to pay for their bills, or we leave them in financial hardship. That can include loyalty and club card points. Signs will then be not being able to pay your bills, loss of assets, the expenditures higher than their living conditions, or not having enough food or clothing. When we're in people's homes, you may see a pile-up of bills and an inability to pay for normal lifestyle things. So again, it's important that we're open-minded and we keep an eye out for those signs and symptoms. Sexual abuse is when a person becomes involved in a sexual relationship or activity that they do not want to be involved in. Again, there can be direct sexual abuse and indirect sexual abuse. Direct sexual abuse is the fact that I may be touching somebody inappropriately and making them feel uncomfortable. I may be penetrating or non-penetrating. Non-contact sexual abuse, I can do this via innuendos. I could be joking with you. I could be saying things that make you feel uncomfortable. I may be showing you images or unnecessary pornography in which you haven't consented to see. If we then look at the symptoms around sexual abuse, we've got things such as sores, pains, bruising, clusters, maybe burns where people have been tied down. The vagina or anus may have discharge. You may have unwanted pregnancy. So there's lots of things here in which we can look at. We may have blood-stained underwear or clothing. People may be walking in an uncomfortable manner. And alternatively, they may have sexually transmitted infections, so things related to sexual intercourse. Neglect, we have two forms of neglect. We have normal neglect and willful neglect. So both of the neglects here that we're looking up here is we have failed to do something which has resulted in harm, or I have deliberately done something which has resulted in harm. So let me give you an example. I may have been really busy today and I forgot to give you your medication. Because I forgot to give you your medication, you had a seizure or a diabetic emergency. That was accidental. I didn't mean to do it, but I've still caused you harm. And that was neglectful. I failed in my duty of care to protect you. However, on the other hand, I may deliberately not have given you your medication to cause those seizures. So therefore, I'm willful. What I'm doing is a deliberate attempt to cause you harm. Signs and symptoms then could be things such as malnutrition, dehydration, bed sores, stained clothing, and wrong dosage of medication. But on the neglect scale, we can self-neglect. We can stop caring for ourselves, and again, that can happen through other psychological issues. So domestic violence, modern slavery might result in self-neglect, where actually I can't cope anymore, I've given up, I'm starting to shut down as a person. So I stop worrying about my hygiene, I stop worrying about what I look like, and then my behaviours start to change as well. We have psychological abuse. So this results in when I devalue you and make you feel worthless. Maybe I make you feel unloved or uncared for, I start blaming and control you. The symptoms alongside this, or the signs, will be you start to see people becoming anxious. Maybe they lack confidence. Maybe their self-esteem starts to drop. Maybe they're not sleeping. The other thing in which they could do, they start blaming themselves. It's my fault, I deserve this. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Down to organisational or institutional abuse. Happens when the care service or the caregivers feel that their regimes and routines are more important than the people that they're caring for. An idea of this might be somebody says to you, can I go to the toilet? And you say, no, we do a toilet round at 10 o'clock. Can I have a cup of tea? No, you get a cup of tea at 11 o'clock. So that's seen as institutional abuse. When we go down the institutional abuse, it obviously makes people feel worried and anxious and starts to demean quality of life. How can we spot it? Poor care standards, rigid routines, lack of staff development and learning. So it's really important we work together to raise care standards. Discriminatory abuse refers to people being treated less equally based upon their protected characteristics, and we've already covered those in our equality and diversity training. However, we know, due to sex, race, gender, reassignment or religious beliefs, if I started to treat you less favourably because of any of those, I will be committing an offence. It's important that we look out for signs of this. Again, poor services that don't meet people's needs, verbal abuse, people being disrespected, exclusion from activities and things, and discrimination, whether it's direct or indirect. And again, here we cover that in Standard 4. So when we talk about restrictive practices, we're referring to detaining or holding somebody to stop them from moving. This can normally happen during a challenging and aggressive behaviour. And restrictive practice refers to the term that may need to be used around physical restraint or physical interventions. We may use devices such as handcuffs or holding items, or medication to calm you down, or indeed seclusion rooms, which are common in mental health hospitals. Restrictive practices must be legal and ethical, and they must be justified and absolutely necessary to prevent serious harm. Any restrictive practice that is used inappropriately will almost certainly be a breach of human rights. So what that means is, if I respond to an incident where there's challenging or aggressive behaviour and my response isn't proportionate, then actually I've committed an offence. Protecting adults from abuse and neglect falls under the Care Act 2014 as a duty of care. We must have safeguarding rules and policies to protect vulnerable people. We're able to identify those in practices that are open, honest and transparent. So services that have good whistleblowing policies and good complaint procedures normally understand their processes of safeguarding quite well. We need to ensure that we manage all of the inquiries around neglect, and we have an independent team of people that looks at safeguarding concerns. We can have independent advocates and also relevant people to help manage those. When that happens, we need to get people together and we explore what happened and we look at the circumstances that put people at risk. Although local authorities have lead responsibilities for following the 6 principles, care and service supports also have theirs. So your registered manager will be responsible in law for ensuring these 6 key principles work. 1, around empowerment, and I know in previous standards we already spoke about empowerment, but it's easy to see if people are encouraged and promoted to live fulfilled lives and feel that they're able to raise a concern. That's empowerment. Prevention looks at the actions we can take to stop harm. So what are the risk assessments? What are we doing to reduce it? Proportionality? Proportionality looks at the response in which we take to ensure that the professionals work with the best interest of people and know that they're only going to help people that need the help. Protection looks at the way in which we're going to help people once it's been, once a situation's happened and what we're going to do to help people. Partnership working looks at the people that's going to come together during a safeguard. So normally once a safeguarding's come in, you'll have social services, maybe police, care providers and other people together looking at what the situation is and looking at things in a very different angle. And then finally we have accountability, and that's the transparency in delivering safeguarding. So it's important that you know your safeguarding policies and procedures. On your website you will have a safeguarding form in which you to follow, and there'll be ways in which you can raise or blow the whistle following the whistleblowing complaints as well. Abuse and neglect can take place at any time and anywhere. However, there are some situations which place people more vulnerable at risk and when that's going to happen. So here, we look at individuals in their own home. It's easier for an abuser to hide from others. Now, the reality is, because of recent abuse and whistleblowers, a lot of people now are recording their own homes, and that's absolutely fine. If we're doing nothing wrong, we have nothing to hide. But it's important to remember, if cameras are being recorded, we need to maintain people's dignity and privacy as well. Organisational abuse is more likely to happen around standards that are poor, and we're fitting the service around the care provider. So again, a poorly led service will be an indicator of abuse. Services that have challenging behaviours, so maybe things such as mental health and learning disability services, where they deal with difficult situations, can result into safeguarding problems. However, we need to ensure that people are trained to manage those. And particularly care issues around sensory impairments, such as mental health, dementia and learning disabilities, are more exposed to safeguarding because they have more complex needs that need to be met. It's everyone's responsibilities in preventing abuse, so whether that's for adults or for children, so that's standard 10 and standard 11 on the care standards framework. And again, you will do mandatory training on both of those later on. Safeguarding authorities will review what they're doing and they'll have serious case reviews. So if there was significant harm, these will be done. There's some really unfortunate stories online in which you're able to go away after this and have a look at. One of them you could look at is Winterbourne, but if you type in serious safeguarding failures, you'll probably get Victoria Climbié, who had about 137 injuries that went unnoticed, and again Baby P, who had a similar amount, and again both of those young children died due to neglect, harm and abuse. It's all about serious failures. Will look at the poor communication, how it all broke down, why the signs and symptoms weren't picked up, what were the management doing about it, why was there no learning opportunities, and what happened during the recruitment process. It's important you know where to go to get further information, advice and guidance. So again, you can get that from your local council, you can get that from the CQC, and you can get that from just Googling safeguarding. You'll see lots of information, advice and guidance. You must read our policies and procedures, and you must know our agreed ways of working. As you go through, you will find other great resources out there. So this is SCIE, which is the Social Care Institute for Excellence, and I highly recommend you read that. These produce evidence-based practice learning materials that's constantly updated and evolving all the time, and a great resource of information. CQC are the regulators, and again you have carers direct helpline numbers, and you have other things that you can have a look at on the internet. It's important that we're promoting people's dignity and rights, and again you've done that in your previous standards. So we're talking about communicating, we're talking about respecting dignity and privacy, and we're encompassing equality and diversity there. It's important to work in a personal-centred way, and again you will have done your personal-centred care training, so you understand what personal-centred is, because you might inadvertently be causing a safeguarding issue accidentally by working in a way which you think is the right way but is not the right way for your customer. Multi-agency working is clearly important because we all have to work together, because we have a duty of care to protect people. And when we work together as a multidisciplinary team, we're able to understand people's strengths and we're able to provide better outcomes for people. So be aware that multi-agency working is something that you need to do, and we did cover that again in previous standards. Managing risk is always important, and again, we're aware that risk is a very fluid thing. It is about identifying the hazard, trying to find a restriction, trying to find an alternative to reduce that, but ultimately we need people to make decisions for themselves. Positive risk-taking or risk enablement involves supporting individuals to identify and assess their own risks, enabling them to take the risks they choose. It is a key part of person-centred care, and the emphasis is that the individual is an expert in their own care. So again, we have to assume if somebody is taking a positive risk, that we've enabled them to do that. Organisations have a duty to provide safe information for people. We need to be open and clear about individual well-being. We need to be working towards the CQC fundamental standards. We need to be using the codes of practice. We should know how to look at the signs and symptoms of abuse. You need to know how to respond, and obviously be trained how to respond. You need to treat all allegations of abuse and neglect seriously, and we need to promote the values in a person-centred way. We spoke about complaints in our previous training sessions, and again, people have to feel empowered to raise complaints, whether that's formal or informal, and complaints create an excellent source of evidence for CQC. The more complaints you have, the more it shows that you're empowering people to use it. Spotting signs and symptoms of neglect, again, is really important. We need to be vigilant, we need to work across the range, and we need to know what to do if we do spot it. So, responding to abuse and neglect, you should always allow the person to speak freely and openly in a safe and secure environment. So go back to your communication principles. It's important that you don't ask questions, but you allow the person to what we formerly known as free flow, so you just allow them to talk. So you could say to them, in your own words, please tell me what happened, and you can record that. You must not ask questions because you do not want to be the first person taking a statement. If there's evidence, we do not touch it. So if there's blood-stained clothes or if there's anything around them, we leave the scene as it is. If the abuse is happening in front of you, you may want to, if you feel safe to do so, stop it and de-escalate it. But if you don't feel that you're able to do that, don't put yourself at risk. Obviously, just get help immediately. It's important that you follow your company's policies and procedures, which again, you should be able to find on the website. Remember, if abuse is taking place, it is more likely then to be a criminal activity as well. So if you are out on your own and you feel you need to get police support, then feel free to obviously call emergency services. We've spoken about whistleblowing before. Again, it's important for you to understand your whistleblowing policies and know how to report something if you feel things aren't being done. But you must follow your organisation's policies and procedures for whistleblowing. So let's look at some of the legislation. We've already looked at the Care Act 2014. We've got the Mental Capacity Act 2005. So again, consent, capacity. We've looked at the Human Rights Act. So the right to be free from torture, the right to a family life. GDPR, so the right to protect my information. The Equality Act, to be treated fairly and not be discriminated. And again, sharing of information and record keeping, so on the need to know only. Confidentiality is again one of those areas in which you are not able to keep something a secret. So it's important that you work on a need-to-know basis only, that you don't promise to keep anything a secret, but you assure them you will only tell the people that need to know. People have the right to refuse to tell you something. So if you feel that they're going to disclose something, warn them. Just simply say, look, I feel that you're going to tell me something. If you tell me something, I can't promise to keep it a secret if I believe that somebody's at harm. So let's have a look now on what you need to know. So this is the knowledge required for you to pass this section. So question 1 looks at, compare the two boxes below and explain the term safeguarding for adults, and you can also explain your roles and responsibilities. So what it means, and then your roles and responsibilities, which you will find on your policies and procedures. Here you need to list the 10 types of abuse and then the possible indicators. Now you only need to write a few, not all of them. Here you're going to look at the definition of harm and complete the sentence below. So the term harm means, and again what you think it means, but we covered that further up. Here you're going to write why an individual who requires care support is more vulnerable to abuse and neglect. So if you remember, we covered that in people living in their own homes because there's less people around to see them. Here you've got a table. So again, you need to describe why it may increase the likelihood of individuals experiencing neglect, to being cared for in their own homes, residential institutions, mental health issues, and then difficulties in communicating. In this box, we're going to look at restrictive practice and when it may be used. So if you remember, we were talking about if someone's at significant harm and maybe we need to restrain or seclude or move someone to a place of safety, when that can be done. Here, we're going to look at factors which have featured in the cases of adult abuse and neglect, and here you've got a failure to identify signs of abuse, and then there were other risk factors higher up to answer that. Here we're looking at 4 sources of information, so what you could do and where you could go to find out more information to support your role. Remember, we had local authorities, safeguarding reviews, serious failures, SCIE, etc. In this one, you're going to give examples of how the care environment can undetermine an individual's dignity and rights. So a care environment that promotes individuals' rights and dignity, and then again you'll just complete the sentences. Here we're looking at about keeping individuals safe, so you need to give examples of how to apply the above principles. So if we work in a personal centred way, how does that reduce abuse? If we support people with active participation, how does that reduce abuse? And if we allow people the right to choose, how does that reduce abuse? In this one, it wants you to explain how you could link to your workplace's policy procedures for safeguarding, and about work with multidisciplinary teams, and again that's just a short explanation. Here we're looking for you to list the ways in which the likelihood of abuse can be reduced by managing risk and focusing on prevention. So the things that we do to prevent abuse, such as being open, honest and transparent, having a whistleblowing policy, complaints policy, and working in a personal centred way. So all of those things there. Here, you need to talk about how you can have clear complaints procedure and how a clear complaints procedure reduces the likelihood of abuse, and it kind of links to what we just said up there, because the more complaints procedure we have, the more likely it is people are going to be open, honest and transparent, and it shows that empowerment in which we spoke about earlier. Here you need to obtain a copy of your workplace policies and procedures for safeguarding, and in your own words you need to tell me what it is you're going to do. So you'll need to go online and you'll need to download those from your company's website. And again, you just have to summarise what you will do. Another spider graph, so listing relevant policy procedures. So you've got the Care Act 2014, the Human Rights Act, you've got GDPR, etc. So we covered those legislations further up, so there. Here, you need to explain why it's important to share information with relevant key people and agencies. So we spoke about multidisciplinary teams and we spoke about on the need to know. Here, what you could do if you have concerns and who could you pass them on to. And again, that's a describe. So you need just to tell me what it would do if you had a concern and who would you report it to. And you've got 2 boxes there. So safeguarding is everyone's responsibility, and Standard 10 and Standard 11 looks at adult and children. You will do mandatory training around safeguarding. It's an annual requirement for adults and children. And again, you normally do these online as distance learning materials. What's important is that you understand what to do if you suspect abuse is taking place, and that you feel empowered enough to report. So please have courage, which is one of your 6 C's, to raise concerns and ensure people feel empowered to report. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in Standard 12.